our time to spend together, cooking, doing science, learning about peace, being creative, or exploring the world around us. We start Global Gardens by doing Community Circle. Community Circle is where we breathe in the good parts, so things that we want to hold on to, or we breathe out the bad parts, things that we want to let go of. So let's take a second to think about the things that we want to breathe in or breathe out. All right, are you guys ready? Let's take 5 breaths together. So breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. That was awesome. All right, let's get started with today's activities.
Hi everyone! Today is all about habitats. But what is a habitat? Well, a habitat is a place in nature where plants and animals live, kind of like a home. In a habitat, we need shelter, food, water, and space for us to survive. So why would it be important to learn about habitats? Well, we need to learn and know how animals can survive in nature, as well as plants. Especially with this being global gardens, we need to know how certain plants can adapt and live in certain habitats. So, for example, the rainforest, that climate is very wet, right? They get a lot of rain versus the desert that's really dry and they don't get much rain. So different plants are going to be able to survive in different habitats. For example, the cactus doesn't need as much water as other plants, and so they can be found in the desert because they hold their water in their little stems. So if you've ever overwatered a cactus and it dies, well, there's your answer. Or let's think about California versus Oklahoma, where we live. So California is quite sunny, right? They don't really get cold temperatures, too cold like we do, versus Oklahoma, who has hot summers and cold winters. So could we grow like a orange tree or lime tree all year long in Oklahoma, kind of like California does? No, because we get really harsh cold winters. While some people do grow these, they have to bring them in for the winter. Okay, let's dive in a little bit more. Here are some examples of different habitats. The woodlands, big tall trees and lots of leaves. The desert, hot and dry. Polar, here land is covered by massive areas of ice that are frozen most of the year. In the summertime, the sun never sets. And in the winter, the sun never rises. It's located on the top and bottom of Earth. The ocean. The ocean covers 70% of Earth. That is a lot of ocean. Grasslands, large rolling terrains of grasses, herbs, and flowers. Still gets enough rain to support the grasses and can have a moist continental climate or subtropical. The temperatures there range from -40 degrees Fahrenheit to 70 degrees. Might think of wide open spaces and lots of wheat when you think of the grasslands. The rainforest, a very wet and hot climate. That's also where my favorite thing in the world, chocolate, comes from, but we'll get to that later. Here's some animals. Can you guess which animal comes from which habitat? gorillas, monkeys, lions, tigers, reindeer, penguin, giraffe, shark, snake, parrot. What do we think? Here in the woodland, you can find black bears that have plenty of vegetation and it's isolated from human interruption. Also in the forest, you can find deer, moose, wolves, badgers, hedgehogs, maybe some birds, squirrels. Giraffes are found in a savanna, which is a mixed woodland grassland ecosystem. Other animals found in grassland are tigers, lions, cheetahs, elephants. Then there's the ocean. In the ocean, you can find dolphins, whales, jellyfish, sharks, squid, swordfish. Then there's the polar habitat where you can find penguins and polar bears, Arctic fox. In the desert, you can find animals such as camels, coyotes, tortoise, different lizards. Now let's talk about the different food and habitats. Like I mentioned earlier, chocolate being my favorite, that's found from a cacao tree in the rainforest. However, other animals often eat different insects or fruit, depending if they're an herbivore, carnivore, or omnivore. So an herbivore would just eat leafy greens, fruits, and vegetables and nuts, kind of like parrots. And then a carnivore would strictly eat meat. There's also animals that are omnivores, which would mean that they eat meat and veggies. Guys, what's super cool about all of the animals we just learned is how they can adapt to their environment, to the habitat that they're from. For example, bears hibernate in the winter. Different animals are camouflaged to hide from predators. Just like the butterflies, certain animals migrate, others fly. Or like the pufferfish who blows up to get predators away from them. So what are some ways that you and me adapt to our environment? Can you think of any ways? Maybe our hair in our arms and legs that keeps us warm. Or what about, did you know, if you're ever eating something really delicious, have you ever closed your eyes? You're like, this is so good. Well, when you block off one of your senses, so, we have our 5 senses. If we close our eyes, we can't see. And so our other senses are doing double their duty and we can taste the food better. I recommend trying that for some mindful eating sometime. Now that we've learned about some of the macro habitats or the bigger habitats, let's learn about a micro habitat or just a smaller version, like this garden. One microhabitat might be under a rock. Have you ever lifted it up and found a bunch of insects under it? Maybe some roly-polies, spiders, or slugs? What about a compost bin? In our compost bin, there's several consumers that are eating all of the organic residue to help break down our compost, such as millipedes, mites, worms, snails. Let's learn about some other animals in the garden. You will find a lot of spiders. What do they like about the garden? Often you will find a squirrel on the hunt for some yummy food, like an apple that may have fallen out of a tree. Or you may come across some bunny rabbits, for they're on the hunt for food in a warm place. Maybe they want some leafy greens, some cabbage, or even just some grass. Or you may have noticed when you're digging in the dirt that you may come across a worm. Do you think the worm has found a home in the garden? A warm, safe place with food and water? Sometimes the garden can become home to bugs we don't like. These are the eggs of squash bugs. However, the praying mantis is known to take care of little insects that we don't always want in our garden. How about a kitty cat? Why would a cat like a garden? Or a ladybug? Why do ladybugs love the garden? Bumblebees are often found among flowers. Is the garden a good home for a bumblebee? Does it make a good habitat? Is there food and water and shelter? What about these insects? Lastly, birds. Does the garden make a good habitat for a bird? Is there food and water? How about shelter? How can we help birds make a shelter or make a home? Different things you can do in the garden to create a habitat for birds, such as making a bird bath, or instead of taking down the sunflowers, keeping them for the fall and winter, even though they might not be the prettiest. They make a great home, a great shelter for birds, along with the food. Same goes with different flowers. And let's go ahead and talk about some different habitats we can make for other animals. Now it's time to build our own habitat. And there are a few different ways we can do this. But let's start first with our insect hotel. Now remember, not all insects are bad. There are many that are very beneficial to our garden. So let's make an insect hotel for these insects that are good for the garden, such as ladybugs, spiders, praying mantis, and many other insects. All right, let's get started. I did the string so I can hang it. You can hang it in a tree. Just again, make sure it's nice and tight right here. I tried to add some pine cones at the end and some bigger twigs. If you have an apartment, this is also great to hang on the balcony. You can also just put it on the ground somewhere safe. I have only done one so far, but you can keep going in different tubes and stacking them. You could tie it together when you're finished, or whatever your choice is, and keeping them together to create more of a hotel. I also really encourage decorating these. You could put different stickers around them and just make it really fun looking. You could also do different colored yarn, which would look really cool to wrap around. So get creative, and let's move on to the next habitat. Okay, next I want to show you a habitat for our pollinators, and it is called a water garden. Okay, now let's talk about a Global Gardens favorite, worm bins. Worms are super beneficial to the garden. Their worm poop, or scientifically called their worm cast. Their castings are excellent for our soil. They're full of so many nutrients. So to make a worm habitat, there are a few different ways you can do it depending what materials you have access to. So the worm bin that I have done with students is just made out of an old container. Then we got some newspaper and we ripped it into strips, and we would soak it. You don't want it too wet, so we would kind of drain the excess water off. And then you kind of alternate between the soil and the layers of newspaper. You also obviously put food scraps, because our worms need to eat. They love apple cores, leftover lettuce, banana peels, whatever organic food waste you need to get rid of. And then you can decorate the outside to look like a home or hotel, however you'd like to decorate it. And then I put the lid on and left a little space for the worms to get some oxygen. Another way that you can make a worm habitat is taking a 2-liter or PVC pipe. The 2-liter is a little bit more difficult to poke a hole, so always ask for help. And this is more like a worm tower. So you'll get your PVC pipe, drill a hole, or your 2-liter, and you'll actually dig a hole into the garden to plant your tower. And if it's PVC or even your 2-liter, again, you can decorate it, make it look really awesome. And then same thing, so you'll just take your food scraps and put it into your tower and your paper scraps. And then since it's already dug into the hole, it'll just go straight into the soil with your worms. And with that PVC pipe or 2-liter, it's important to also have a lid just to keep any pests away from your worms. Oh, and I always use red wiggler worms. But get creative with how your worm habitat looks. Just as long as you have the essentials, you should be good to go. So now I want you to think about all of the different habitats we've talked about. Has it given you any ideas of how to help the different animals and plants? What about yourself? Think about your food source. Where does your food come from in your habitat? Can you trace your food back to the source? Just like we learned how a giraffe might eat the leaves off of a tall tree. The giraffe knows exactly where it's getting its food. Where are we getting our food? Yeah, we might get it from a fast food place or a grocery store, but what was the process it took for them to get the food there? How can we help create a better habitat for you and me? Could we start by planting our own food? And that way we know exactly where our food is coming from. Could we help by picking up trash and keeping our air clean? What are some ideas you have? Okay, now that we've learned all about habitats, I want to read you a story about my personal favorite microhabitat, the garden. As I'm reading, I want you to pay attention to how many different animals could be found in the garden. Maybe make a list and count how many you can find. And then think about all of their different homes. Would it be possible to create a home yourself for these animals? Okay, let's get started. Up in the Garden and Down in the Dirt by Kate Mesner with art by Christopher Silas Neal. Take a look at some of these vegetables and herbs. Are there any that you're familiar with or some that you have not heard of? Thyme, fennel, carrots, cucumber, sage, potatoes. Up in the garden, I stand and plan, my hands full of seeds and my head full of dreams. Spring sun shines down to melt the sleepy snow. Wind whistles through last year's plants and mud sucks at my rain boots. It's not quite time, Nana says. Down in the dirt, things need to dry out and warm up. What's down there? I ask. Down in the dirt is a whole busy world of earthworms and insects, digging and building and stirring up soil. They're already working down in the dirt. Up in the garden, we snap brittle stalks, scoop rustly armfuls, and wheel away weeds for the chickens. While they squabble and scratch, we spread compost over the soil. Down in the dirt, pill bugs chew through the last year's leaves. I give a gentle poke. They roll up tight and hide in plated suits of armor, roly-poly round. Up in the garden, it's time to plant. I trail a furrow with my finger and sprinkle seeds in a careful row. Give them a drink, Nana says. We pat them down to snuggle in the dark. Down in the dirt, a tomato hornworm rests, waiting for wings, and the leaves where she'll lay her eggs. Up in the garden, carrot plants sprout, pea blossoms bloom, wasps are on the prowl, and honeybees visit, legs loaded with pollen. I weed and wilt and sun so strong, even Nana looks for shade. Down in the dirt, earthworms tunnel deep. I'm jealous of their cool, damp, dark. Up in the garden, rain shower. Nana turns the hose on me. Eee! I hide behind the cucumber vines, but their leaves can't save me. I shiver and laugh, drenched in Nana's rain. Down in the dirt, water soaks deep. Roots drink in it, and a long-legged spider still walks over the streams. Up in the garden, there's so much to eat. Ladybugs feast on aphids. Nana crunches green beans. I bite a ripe tomato, warm from the sun. Juice dribbles down my chin. Down in the dirt, a robin's beak finds a cricket, a beetle, a grub. Slugs are scrumptious too. Up in the garden, we pick cukes and zucchini, harvesting into the dark. Bats swoop through the sunflowers. and I pluck June bugs from the basil until it's time for bed. Down in the dirt, skunks work the night shift. They snuffle and dig and gobble cutworms while I sleep. Up in the garden, a praying mantis wakes to hunt mosquitoes. Nana sprays away the aphids, and I'm after grasshoppers, ready to swoosh. But snap! Someone else is faster. Down in the dirt, a smooth, shining garter snake crunches on supper. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Up in the garden, the wind grows cool. Pumpkins blush orange, and sunflowers bow to September. Nana ties them together to build a house for reading. Down in the dirt, an orb weaver spins her web, strand by silken strand. She'll munch on moths tonight. Up in the garden, colored leaves litter the squash vines, and we know the cold is coming. Hurry, hurry and harvest. There's enough for the neighbors too. Down in the dirt, frantic ants gather what we leave behind. They're storing food for cooler days ahead. Up in the garden, frost draws lace on leftover leaves where secret egg sacs hang, waiting for the warm to return. We say goodbye and spread the winter blankets. Down in the dirt, beetles burrow. Ants scurry home. Earthworms curl tight in the dark. When Grandpa calls us in for soup, an autumn moon is rising. Up in the garden, dry cornstalks tremble, and the wind smells like winter. But the long, ripe days of summer still rest in the garden beds. The ladybugs and bumblebees, earthworms and ants are hunkered down, hiding, biding their time. Dreaming of sunshine and blossoms and sprouts. Under the bare arms of trees and the blanketing snow, a whole new garden sleeps down in the dirt. Author's note: every garden is a community garden. Do you know why? You may work hard planting seeds and pulling weeds, but plants can't thrive without the help of all of these smaller gardeners down in the dirt. Some help by controlling pests that would like to gobble up your broccoli and tomatoes before you have a chance to eat them yourself. Some help by creating tunnels, which bring air into the soil and let water drain more easily. And believe it or not, some help just by going to the bathroom right there next to the green beans. This adds important nutrients to the soil. A healthy organic garden isn't a garden without bugs. It's packed with lots and lots of living things, all working together with the human gardeners to nurture healthy plants. The animals you met in this book really do live, eat, and work in many vegetable gardens. Again, some are helpful, but others are not. While we welcome many animals in our garden, there are also quite a few pests, such as the tomato hornworm. The adult moths often lay their eggs on tomato leaves where the larva emerges to eat. So all of those leaves on our tomato plant get damaged. Also, June bugs, and they're named that because they're common in the months of May and June. The June bug is a double threat to the gardens. The larval grubs will damage the roots of our plants. Bats and skunks are nighttime predators that gobble garden pests after dark. However, skunks have a smelly reputation, and they also sometimes dig holes while they're searching for these insects. So sometimes they are not welcome either. Also, grasshoppers. They might be fun to catch, but they are no friends to our garden plants. They often chow down on the leaves of most vegetables. Carrots, beans, and lettuce are among their favorites. So many gardeners will hand pick grasshoppers from their plants and count on garden predators to take care of the rest. As you can see, there are many more helpers of the garden than there are pests. All right, after listening to the story, what animals stood out to you? Was it the roly-polies or earthworms? They do an excellent job at adding nutrients to our soil. How about the gardener snake or bats? Those might seem scary at first, but there's no reason to be scared of them because they're also helping us out by getting some of the insects that destroy our plants. So next time you see a pile of leaves or a wood pile, just know that some of these animals that are helping our garden are living under there. And so we can make these homes by building them ourselves, or if we happen to see them, a pile of leaves, instead of bagging it up, we can just let it be. All right, everybody, enjoy your day, and I'll see you next time.